Welcome. My name is Steven Payne, Director of the Bronx County Historical Society. Today is March 16th, 2023, and I'm really delighted to be here with Marti Zuckrow, who will be talking about both her own family and the Woods, all of whom at one time or another lived in the Allerton Coops, or the United Workers Cooperative Colony, as its longer name is, located at 2700 Bronx Park East. Marti, thank you so much for being here. And why don't you start off by talking about your family's history and background, whatever you might know about it, and how they ended up in the Bronx.
Okay, glad to be here. Okay, my mother was from Odessa, born in Odessa, and then moved to Moscow. And her mom came to America, and she was going to go with her, but my mother had rickets and I think trachoma. I'm not sure what that is. Anyhow, she got left behind. But my mother came here when she was 16. And she actually ended up in the Bronx with her sister, Elsie.
Wow.
But that was over 174th Street and Tremont Avenue.
Sure.
So she was 16. His father had come to America, the usual thing, to make money and send for his family.
Yeah.
And while he was here, the mother died. So leaving my father, the oldest of 4 children, in Minsk, Poland.
Wow.
And the story that I heard is that my father, they all got cholera after the mother died. No, the mother died of cholera. And so they were left alone. And the story, I don't know if it's true, but my father went to the rabbi and somehow got money for them to come to America. That's the story that I heard.
Sure.
And I don't know where my father came to, but I know my mother had come to the Bronx. Let's see. Then I know that I wasn't born yet, but Peppy, my sister, Peppy Stella Wood, they came here. No, that's true. I'm confused. Yes, yeah, it's true. They came here and they lived with my Aunt Rose in Brooklyn.
Ah, okay.
And my mother's sister, and their mother, my grandmother, and they had my Uncle Rose and my Aunt Rose and Uncle Nat. They had a junk store. I remember.
Wow.
Somewhere in Brooklyn, there would be bananas and mouse traps and all sorts of weird things. Okay, I know they lived there. And then I do remember we moved to Mount Eden Avenue in the Bronx. That's when I start remembering.
Okay. How old were you around that time?
Well, it was pre-kindergarten.
Okay, I see.
Yeah, because I was still in a stroller.
Yeah.
And we used to go in the stroller to Bathgate Avenue, where all the old Jews.
Sure.
I remember that.
I've seen photographs. I mean, it's amazing to see photographs.
Yeah, no, that was amazing. It was all the old Jews, and I remember getting, shopping there. So we lived there for a while. It was a very, very dark apartment, and my mother hated that. At any rate, I had an uncle, my Uncle Al, who was my mother's brother. My mother is the 18th child in her family.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Anyhow, my Uncle Al was a real character. He was a tailor, amazing tailor, but he also was an extra in the Metropolitan Opera.
Wow.
He carried Caruso on his shoulders, blah, blah, blah. Anyhow, he made some money, working, and he bought a house for us on Kruger Avenue in the Bronx. And that was like 1 block above White Plains Road and 1 block from Allerton Avenue.
Sure.
And so we moved into that house, and he moved into when we moved into that house, we lived upstairs and another family still lived downstairs, and he moved into the basement. And then eventually they moved out. We moved downstairs. We always rented out to boarders to get more money.
Yeah.
So we had people living there. I think there was a Mr. Schaefer. Okay, so then my sister, Peppy, because she's 8 years older than me.
I see.
So she moved out at 18. So what did that make me? 10?
10, yeah.
Yeah. And I think she moved to the Coops probably 2 years later. She was always at our house with Butchie. And so that's when I started hanging out at the Coops, because I was not happy in my home. And that really became my second home.
I see. I see.
And I actually, I was there with Butchie's birth when they came home.
wow.
And there's a lot of racism with my mother and Al's mother when Butchie was born. And I remember my mother and Al's mother, who was, brown skin,
Yeah.
were both panic stricken that Butchie would be black. Both of them.
Okay, sure.
At any rate, so my mother was racist. She wouldn't say she was, but
Yeah.
my mother, I think, didn't like that she had dark skin. Her mother was blonde and blue-eyed, and I think she had a lot of issues about being dark-skinned. My father was also very fair.
Yeah.
So then I started hanging out at the Coops all the time because I was hanging out with Butchie. I was the babysitter.
Sure. Yeah.
And then I totally lived there. And then, let me think. I was going to Camp Kinderland, and I was, I guess, 14. And that's when I started going out with only African-American boys.
Okay, sure. And at Camp Kinderland, what was the makeup of the campers from what you remember?
It was not, it was mainly white. It was mainly white. We had very, very few Black friends. As a matter of fact, Edith Siegel, who was our dance teacher, I'm sure you've heard about her.
Yes.
Who was an amazing woman. There was a performance that we did with the one Black girl, Phyllis. Her name was Phyllis Strong. And it was kind of showing her coming into the room, the one Black girl. So it was white. It was very white. I mean, they had a good, I mean, I think their heart was in the right place, but it was basically Jewish.
Sure.
I think there were a few Asians. I remember there was Alma Moy, but very few. At any rate, when I started going out with Black boyfriends, I would be at my sister's. So my mother didn't know. So
what would your mother have done? Or how did she react when your sister got together with
not well. I've talked about my sister. I talked about this with my sister recently.
Yeah.
And my father was great. My father said, "You're 18, wait 1 year, and I will make you the biggest wedding in the world." And he, took them out to dinner and all that kind of stuff.
Yeah.
But they wanted to get married right away. My mother, from what I heard, I don't know if it's true or not, but I think I heard that my mother put a noose up in the bathroom and she was going to kill herself. But I think it was just for drama effect.
Yeah.
My mother, she was a very troubled woman. She's
sure.
I mean, now with hindsight, I mean, she was sexually abused. She was the 18th child. She was left in orphanages, very disturbed.
Yeah.
But so I mean, I basically lived at my sister's. My boyfriends would come there, pick me up, would hang out. Unfortunately, I got knocked up, so my parents found out about it. And I was, I don't know, God, 16. So then I was in trouble, but
that's funny. Wow.
And it was hysterical because my boyfriend, this was another boyfriend I had at the time, and I had met him actually at Camp Kinderland.
Okay.
Because and then they found out that I got drunk, so they took me home from Camp Kinderland, and then my boyfriend Wesley quit, so I hung out with him all summer, which is how I got knocked up.
Did he live in the Coops or in the neighborhood?
No, he lived in Harlem.
Okay.
No, I spent many years in Harlem.
Yeah.
remember being the only white person in the Apollo Theater one time.
Sure.
At any rate, so my parents already knew I was a bad girl. And then I remember my boyfriend called, it was hilarious. He called and he tried to have a Jewish accent to talk to me, which was hilarious.
How did that work for him?
They hung up on him. Let's see. So anyhow, I'm saying I hung out all the time at my sister's. I went
Which port did they live in?
well, they lived in the third court, because
Okay.
I eventually that's the apartment that I moved into when they moved to Co-op City.
Okay.
I moved into the third court, and then several years later I moved into the first court.
Okay.
But I remember, I mean, we used to have a milk machine downstairs. You get milk right outside. Let me see. So I went to PS 76. People that lived in the Coops went to PS 96.
Yeah.
In my school, it, it, it was a lot of Italians,
Sure.
a lot of Jews, a few African Americans, not that many.
Yeah.
A kid from the Dominican Republic.
Yeah.
And then when I went to high school, my best friend was Nancy Turner, and she lived in the Coops. She was actually a babysitter for Peppy too.
Oh, okay. I see.
She was my best friend. She was a Jehovah's Witness. It was really interesting.
Was her brother Charles
She was
Turner? Oh,
she,
okay. Must be a different Turner then.
yeah, her father was a railroad conductor. Her mother was a cleaning lady, and her mother was not a Jehovah's Witness, but the father and she was. And at that time, I was going to Washington and all these integration marches, and she didn't go because it was not her world. Her world was later.
Sure.
Okay, let's see. So she was my best friend.
And you went to Christopher Columbus? Is that the high school you went
Yeah,
to?
I went to Christopher Columbus High School. And that was, it was a lot of Pelham Parkway people and Parkchester.
Mm-hmm.
And there were not that many non-whites there.
Yeah, sure.
And I remember my black friends that were there, they used to have to, they took the subway to come and go. They didn't live right near there.
Yeah.
Um,
What were the teachers like throughout your public school experience?
well, my best experience was when I was in PS 76 because we had ballet every day.
Okay.
So that was wonderful. It's hard to remember. What I do remember is being in high school and my father saying, "Don't you dare go under the seat when they do that. The Russians are going to bomb you."
Yeah, sure.
And then I also couldn't say "under God" when they put that in.
Yeah.
And in high school, I was already a misfit. I hung out with the weirdos, and a lot of my friends were black. And I mean, I got through high school only because of dancing.
Sure.
They'd use me to be a demonstration. Then let me see. Yeah, that's what I remember. My sister moved out early, so then it was me and my parents. My father was the business editor of the Jewish communist newspaper, the Freiheit.
Oh, okay. I didn't realize that. Wow.
Yeah. Abraham Lechevitsky.
Okay. Wow.
And then he was the head of the Kuf, which was some, I don't know, Jewish musical, I don't know what.
Yeah.
My mother worked as a finisher in the garment center, hated it, got up in the morning. I've done a lot of performance pieces about it. She was basically the breadwinner.
Yeah.
So that's how we came to the Bronx. I don't know if that's enough.
Yes, absolutely. And did you have other family members on either of your parents' side that lived? Well, actually, I guess you did, because it was your uncle who lived in the
My
basement.
uncle lived in the basement. And he was what we now said PTSD from the war. So he was
Okay.
very strange. And my Aunt Elsie lived on 174th Street.
Yeah.
Other relatives lived in Brooklyn and Queens.
Okay. Okay. I see. And you mentioned, your mother's kind of emotional troubles and all. What about your father? What was your relationship with your father like?
My father didn't like me. I was a dad girl.
Yeah,
No, he loved my sister's experience is totally different. I
I
mean,
see. Yeah,
she
sure.
was a goody two shoes, and he was really great with her. He he thought I was a whore. He spit in my face once.
Mm,
Um, I don't really know him. I know that well, with hindsight, I believe he was sincerely right on politically.
sure,
His interest in life was making the world a better place for
sure.
everyone else. But it wasn't a good relationship.
I see. I see. Yeah, yeah. That's why you spent so much time in the coops, like you already said, right?
Yeah, well, yeah, I didn't have a good relationship with my father. My mother was nuts. So
Yeah, yeah. And it was just you and your sister, right? Any other siblings?
a half sister. My father, when he first came to America, I think he was 13. Well, I guess a few years later, they married him off to somebody. I don't know why.
Oh, okay.
He had a child with that person.
Yeah.
Her name was Judy. So she was a half sister. And then they got divorced, and my father wanted to take Judy, but my mother didn't want her. And also, the wife said she was going to report him to the FBI for his political activities.
Oh, wow.
So,
Wow.
so Judy ended up severely mentally ill.
Yeah,
So she was a half sister, but I didn't know her well.
sure. Sure. And what about the Woods after Peppy married into the family? Would you spend much time with kind of the extended Woods family or just
Yeah, I lived there. Oh yeah, no, I lived there. I was there every weekend. I was there after school.
yeah,
'Cause, I walked from my house. It was 5 blocks.
sure. Sure. And who all was in that family? I mean, obviously there's Al.
It was
Um,
Al and Peppy, and then Butchie was the firstborn.
yeah,
Um, then there was Robin, and then Shari. And Shari is the only surviving child from my sister. Unfortunately, two of her kids died.
hmm,
I know, really, really horrible. But Shari, just because I asked Shari, would she want to be part of this? But she doesn't remember much about the Coops because she was very young when they moved to Co-op City.
I see, I see, I see. Yeah. Yeah. And what about did did Al have what if Al's family
Oh,
lived
I
in
knew a lot. Oh, I knew a lot of his family. I
yeah.
mean, his sister Sadie lived in the Coops. Actually, Sadie, that's right. No, I think Sadie moved into my sister's apartment when she moved to Co-op City, and then I moved into Sadie's apartment.
Oh, okay,
think,
okay.
I think. And Sadie, she was married to Frank Day. And Frank Day helped me pawn a guitar when I needed money for an abortion. But I hung out there all the time. And then Al's brother, God, what was his name? Frank. Frank was a parole officer, big dude. Big
Okay,
And then Daniel was his other brother. And Daniel had married to Dolly. And there was somebody else. And then they had a lot of friends. I hung out with him, Monroe. I mean, basically, it was, and then my sister's closest friends, Tina, was married to Lefty. Lefty was a musician, that black
sure.
man. I know you probably heard about him.
I have a little bit, not too much though, actually. I've
He,
really
he
just
went,
heard it mentioned.
they got divorced and he went to New Amsterdam. Lovely guy. And so it was Tina and her, and then it was Esther, who was married to Joe. So it was a lot of interracial family couples,
Sure.
lots and lots of friends.
Yeah.
So we did picnics, and we had a good time.
Yeah. And uh, so just to get a sense of like the larger climate at the time, were you what was the height of McCarthyism? Were you too young to kind of
No,
experience that with your family? Or are you still
no,
experiencing it?
I was terrified. I was
Yeah.
terrified. I remember when my parents went, when the Rosenbergs were being executed,
Yeah.
I was sure that my parents were never going to come home again, and they were going to kill them too. And the
Wow.
FBI used to come to our house,
Sure.
on a monthly basis.
Not surprised. And what would they try and pretend like they were salespeople or something like that,
Oh,
or just
no,
open?
they would ask my father, would you give us any names and stuff like that? We would stay upstairs, but he would talk to them, and he was totally cool with them. I guess he was terrified, but
Yeah,
he would come. I remember the two guys with the suits. I've written a lot of stuff about this, actually. I don't know if you'd be interested in it, but I
I
have,
would.
yeah, I have. I'm trying to think what I have. Well, I have a novel that never got published, but
Oh, really?
yeah, I have a lot of stuff.
I absolutely would be interested in anything. I mean, you know,
All
uh,
right.
yeah, we have the archives here, which the oral histories are a part of it, but we have 164, archival collections.
I have a bunch of stuff. It was called Franny Z, the Bronx Kid, and then
Oh, wow.
I concised it, which I wasn't happy with, and I got a grant to self-publish. But Franny Z, the Bronx Kid was a lot about the Bronx. I also have a lot of stories about the Coops.
Okay. I'm very interested in that. Yeah.
I'll look and see what I have. Yeah.
Yeah. And so what are some of the things that you would do around the coops? I know, well, before this oral history, I know you've mentioned the secular Jewish club to me before, and obviously the dancing. Describe some of those various activities, whether formal or informal.
Yeah. Well, um, let me think that the shula that we went to when I first started going to the secular school, it was actually a block away from my house. But then when I went to middle shul, you know the difference.
Yes. Yeah.
So they moved it was in the basement in the cellars in the coops. And it would be, I can't remember. I know it was all day Saturday and then some other time. Oh, it was great. It was great. I mean, I mean, I was fluent in Yiddish at that time.
Wow.
I mean, we were reading literature in Yiddish, and we had history and current events. And I mean, these became my close friends because I didn't, I mean, I was different than other people that weren't the Jewish progressive or Black misfits.
Absolutely.
And then, that was, we had dance classes, we had a chorus, and we did a concert every year. And I was like always one of the star dancers. The current events, probably a lot of propaganda. I don't remember. I don't remember. I will say that with hindsight, it was, I think that I was terrified to even think that maybe I believed anything else.
Yeah.
Atheism. I mean, it was like a betrayal. And I am atheist, but it scared me not to think that. It was very indoctrinating,
Sure.
and of course everyone supported it. And I remember going to demonstrations. I don't even know why. Something about Hungary at the UN. I would just, every demonstration we would go to. I don't even know why. No, we were demonstrating. On May Day, we would go and dance at Union Square.
Sure.
But in the Coops, okay, so I did the shul there. And then, of course, when I came back later, when I was, when I had kids, I hung at the playground in Bronx Park East and all of that. That was a different experience.
Absolutely.
And the first thing I ever heard about feminism was from Joellen.
Okay.
She had a girlfriend, Rachel, at the time, I think was her name.
Yeah.
And they invited me to have a consciousness raising, and I was terrified. I said, "What is that?" Absolutely terrifying. I can't do that. I didn't know anything about feminism at that time.
Yeah. That's funny. So you mentioned, various demonstrations that you would go to. Do you remember any in the neighborhood or in the Bronx in general?
No, it was more we'd go to Washington. We
Yeah.
remember from the Coops, we would have a bus from the Coops, you
Wow.
know, yeah, from the Coops going to the integration marches. I don't think that was, I don't think we did. No, I don't remember. I don't remember any demonstrations in the Bronx.
Sure. Sure.
We
Yeah.
it would be Manhattan. It would be Manhattan at the UN building or
Yeah. Yeah. I've only ever heard about a handful, and I think probably some of them you might have been too young for anyway. Like in Parkchester in the 50s, there was uh, a lot of activity since it was, an all-white housing complex, and there were people, trying to break that.
vaguely might have remember that. I don't know because I don't know. Something just came to mind. I know my parents were at all sorts of union kind of demonstrations, but I think my mother was pregnant with me at one demonstration, but I don't remember that.
It's a little cloudy. Was the uh was actually, I guess probably you might have been too young for this, but do you remember the American Labor Party Hall?
Oh,
Uh,
of course I do. And
oh, okay, okay.
oh
Yeah,
my God,
sure.
we had all the bar mitzvahs there. My dance class was there.
Okay, sure.
Oh yeah, weddings were there.
Yeah.
Oh yeah, I mean that was our place.
Yeah. I think it's a Pentecostal church right now,
Well,
which is
that's fair. It
which
seems
is funny to think about.
no, it was a great place. I remember I would be up at a bar mitzvah and I'd have one of my black boyfriends say, "Okay, meet me outside at a certain amount of time," and then I would leave the thing and go hang out with them for an hour and then come back.
Oh,
And
um,
I had a I had a good friend, Harris, also a dancer, Harris Salzberg. I'm a little bit in touch with him. He lived in Washington Heights, but he was one of my middle school and kindergarten friends. And we used to go to the laundromat on Allerton Avenue and sit in the dryer.
that's funny.
It
Uh,
was
what about other stores on Allerton Avenue?
Joe Tuckman's. Have you heard of
Okay.
Joe Tuckman's?
Say it again.
Joe Tuckman's. Have you heard of Joe Tuckman's?
Joe Tuckman's. What kind of store was it?
Oh my God. It was a a small department store.
Yeah, I haven't heard of it.
Oh my
No
God,
one's
Joe
mentioned
Ellen
it yet.
didn't tell you about it. Right on Allerton Avenue near Bronx Park East.
Okay.
And that was where you went for dungarees in those days.
I see. I
Red
see.
shirts. Oh no, it was the place to go.
Was there still a deli? I think there. I'm
Oh
sure
yeah.
there was still a deli at
Oh
the time.
yeah, yeah, yeah. Oh no, the deli was
Appetizing store there too, right?
that's how we shopped. No, the
Yeah.
deli was right underneath the subway. And next to it was Jaime's uh, candy store where my father and I, the one thing we used to do, we used to get an egg cream together. Then there
Okay.
was the fish store. Then eventually a bagel store came in.
Huh.
Oh, it was wonderful. And then, the butcher, laundromat was across the street. And then across the street on the other side of White Plains Road, there was a bar. And next to that was Moisha's appetizing store. They were
I've
the
heard
two,
some stories about the
yeah, they were
appetizing
the two
store.
brothers. They had been in concentration camps.
Oh,
And
wow.
so I remember that was the first time I saw tattoos.
Yep. Yep. I've heard that about
Yeah,
the
yeah.
about the appetizing store before.
Then there was next to them was Delagado's, which was an Italian grocery, which they eventually opened up a big market up near White Plains. Yes, near White Plains. No, not White Plains Road, Boston Post Road.
Boston Post Road. Okay.
Then there was two little stores, Fleischmann's and Carl's, like women's apparel.
Hmm.
And there was a bank. Maybe it was Manufacturers Bank. I don't remember.
Yeah. Yeah. And
Or there was Al's Camera Shop. Al's Camera Shop. It was a little shop on Kruger Avenue and Allerton Avenue, and then they moved to a big store on the corner. I remember I would go and buy dolls there.
okay. And I know there, at least I know there was an A&P somewhere close.
Oh yeah, there was an A&P was up on Boston Post Road.
Boston Post Road, right? Yeah. And that White Castle.
Oh, I loved White Castle.
That intersection.
12 cents.
That's one of the locations where I have heard about demonstrations before, because in 1963, CORE organized just a kind of routine picket. They were kind of, picketing various places in like 62, 63 and all, because, out of like 150 employees, maybe like 2 were Black. But for one reason or another, I don't know what it was, but I guess some just straight up Nazis heard about it, and some reactionary forces in the Bronx, I guess. And so there's pictures 1963 in July of people. It's probably some Italians in the neighborhood who were trying to be funny, but were being fascist instead, but waving Confederate flags and all that kind of stuff, like counter protesters. You see the pictures and you assume it's like I don't know, Alabama or Mississippi or something.
I don't remember. I certainly remember that because once a week I could go and get a hamburger for 12 cents.
yeah. Not a bad deal. But yeah, there's a couple people from the Coops who remember that particular protest and things like that. That's the only reason that I brought it up. But yeah. And what else about the neighborhood? Where else would you go on a regular basis?
When I was a kid?
Yeah.
I went to there was right near the Coops, there was Project.
Yeah, Parkside, right?
I don't remember what it was called, but I was there. I was there constantly. I was for one point the knock hockey champion.
Okay.
As a kid, went to the playground. I mean, I rode bike rides, skating, roller skating.
Yeah.
We were outside. We played stickball, punch ball. We used to ride. Me and Butch. We used to ride our bikes when he got older on Suicide Hill. I don't know if you know Suicide Hill on Bronx Park East.
I've heard of it before. Yeah.
Yeah, no helmets, no nothing.
Yeah, I think I read one story of some kids, not from the Coops, but just from the Allerton neighborhood. They built like this little boxcar contraption and, put it down Suicide Hill. And of course, they somehow crashed it into something and they all got broken bones and all of that. But
surprised, yeah, because you go down that hill and then down the Bronx River was there. I remember seeing water rats the size of cats in the Bronx River.
And could you go easily into the botanical gardens and all of that at that point through Bronx Park?
I could walk to the zoo and the botanical. I mean, it was a long walk, but I often did. We walked to the botanical gardens and the zoo all the time. It used to be free.
Yeah. Sure. And
and then there was a rock. There was a big rock right at the entrance to. It was Allerton Avenue and Bronx Park East. It was a big rock, and we used to hang out on that rock when we were teenagers. I think Joellen even hung out there. She was younger than me, but
yeah,
we hung out there a lot.
And were there many like neighborhood gangs when you were growing up?
On my block, I had Sal. Sal was the head of the Golden Guineas.
Oh, the Golden Guineas. Okay, yeah, they definitely were a notorious one.
Yeah, and he was a good friend of mine because I was friends with his sisters. And then I didn't know any the Fordham Baldies, but they used to come over and cut girls' hair.
Oh wow! I've
called.
only ever heard rumors of them doing
No, no,
that.
no, no, they did. They did. They would come around and cut ponytails off.
Wow. Have you heard of someone named Denise Oliver Velez before?
No.
She was one of the founding members of the Young Lords, later Black Panther, etc. But she grew up a little in Brooklyn and a little in Queens. But when she was at a I think junior high in Queens, they shut the school down because there was a rumor that the Fordham Baldies were going to come to cut
Oh,
the girls' ponytails off. So they, closed school for a
they
day.
did do it. They did do it.
Okay, wow. Wow. Uh, um, yeah. And what about did you ever have any run-ins with the Ducky Boys they were on the other side of Bronx Park, like in the Norwood area, but sometimes I've heard that they would you know, cause
No,
trouble for people in Bronx Park.
no, but I remember the duck hair or something, the duck's tail or something,
Oh, okay, okay.
which maybe was tied in with, I think the Italian boys used to do that.
Yeah, something like that.
Duck's tail.
Um yeah, and what about like the kind of basement areas in the coops when you were growing up? Was there much kind of activity as far as kids or teenagers hanging out in the basement at
The,
that point?
the laundry rooms were down there, the
Yeah.
washing machines. So you go down there, a lot of stray cats. No, I mean, when we had Shola there, we would kind of go through them, but no, I just remember garbage and cats and laundromat.
I see.
Laundries, yeah.
I see. I see. And you already mentioned that were more or less a misfit when you were growing up. Uh, did other kids was that just kind of inevitable, regardless, or was it tied into being associated with the Coops at all? Did that like factor into the social?
I don't think it was to do with the coops, but I mean, I I was a dancer. I hung out with the black kids.
Yep.
I was a fuck up in school.
Yeah.
Let me think. And I felt very different because I was, I didn't believe in the white American blah blah blah.
Yeah.
And I
Absolutely.
don't think I was anti-capitalist then,
Yeah.
but I mean, I was never into things and clothes and money and makeup and blah, all that stuff. So yeah, I fit in beautifully with my crew.
Sure. Absolutely.
And I had that support between my parents and their friends in their community and my friends. I always felt, like I had a great network, but
Yeah.
it wasn't the straight normal. It still is not.
Absolutely.
Yeah,
Absolutely.
my husband is still a weirdo.
So why don't you talk a little bit about how your life developed after high school, or maybe towards the tail end of high school, continuing forward?
Okay, I'm gonna do a little, and then I think I'm getting tired.
Okay, sure, sure, sure.
So, let's see. Okay, so when I moved out, I moved out of my mother's house. I don't know who was I think I was 19. And I
Yeah.
moved to the Lower East Side with my best friend Nancy Flax, whose brother started SDS, Dick Flax.
Oh, okay, okay. Wow.
And she was my best friend at the time.
Wow.
Yeah, and her parents they lost their jobs during McCarthy, and they were teachers.
Yeah.
So I'm saying all my friends had those experiences. So, okay, we moved
Sure.
to the Lower East Side, and everyone was moving to the Lower East Side I remember the fifth floor walk up. And that's actually where I met Eddie, my first husband. Nancy lived in Brooklyn, and so she went to Brooklyn College.
Yeah.
And so we had a party, and Zena was her sister, came, and she brought Eddie, her brother, who we took a walk, and Eddie did a not a somersault. What do you call it? is it when you flip up, you go on your hands, a cartwheel.
Oh, cartwheel, yeah.
That was it. It's good.
Love at first cartwheel.
Yeah. And um, but so then Nancy and I lived together. Then he was around a lot. So then we moved somewhere else, and then she moved next door. And then I don't remember Eddie and I. Then Eddie and I would always be at my sister's,
Yeah,
because that's where we hung out.
sure.
And then we moved to Brooklyn because Eddie's sister, they went to Belgium. And that's where I had my first kid. I hated Brooklyn.
Yeah, yeah.
Oh, the funny thing was I lived in the Bronx, but I had to be a Dodgers fan because the Yankees didn't have white players.
Yeah, of course.
I had to be a Dodgers fan, which made me weird also. Actually, I lived 1 block away from Ebbets Field. It used to be there. It was a
Wow.
project now.
Yeah.
And yeah, I lived there, hated Brooklyn for 2 years, and then I moved to the Coops.
Oh, okay, I see.
Yeah. And then from the Coops, I had another best friend, Helen. And Helen was married to Carl Jurgens.
Oh, okay, sure.
Yeah, and Paul is his brother.
That's right. Yeah,
Carl is dead. He died of an overdose somewhere. But
yeah.
Paul, I was good friends with Carl, and Paul and I, who's younger. So Helen, Carl's wife, and I, we spent 24/7 together. We had kids that were very close in age. Jamie
Oh,
was Carl's kid, and Aviva was my daughter. I mean, that's when I first learned about carrot cake and healthy things. I knew nothing about that. So Ellen was a great friend of mine. And how I ended up coming out to California was she moved to California to a commune.
Oh, okay, I see.
And I ended up moving out to the commune.
Wow. What kind of commune was it?
Big Rock Candy Mountain, it was called. It was in Berkeley on Woolsey and I forget what.
Yeah.
And uh, there were people there that were on the Lamb.
Yeah.
There were,
Yeah.
there were musicians there. It was foreign. I'll tell you one more story about that, and then I'm too tired.
Sure, sure.
So I had been on welfare because Eddie, my husband, had gone crazy and we had gotten divorced and he died in a mental hospital. But at any rate, so I was on welfare, but I was living in a commune. So the welfare people had to come to the commune and ask every man there, who was a URAM, was it unmarried URAM, wait a minute, unrelated male adult, that they weren't giving me money. Ridiculous.
Wow.
Yeah, that was kind of, I did a performance piece about that.
Wow. Are you still in touch with Helen?
She moved to Canada to be with Paul Jurgens. That's her brother-in-law.
Okay.
So
See.
they live right next door. But I did see her several years ago. She was here for a while taking care of Jamie, and so we got together a few times.
Oh, okay.
And then Helen ended up being my niece's Robin's teacher in junior high.
Wow.
Yeah,
Wow.
no, Helen and I were really great friends. I was devastated when she left. I kind of fell apart when she left.
Yeah, yeah. But Jamie's still in California?
I think they all moved to Montreal.
They all moved to Montreal. I see.
But yeah, I mean, Jamie, but Helen, I remember when she came, Helen, we went to some demonstration in Mosswood Park. I don't remember what it was. I don't even remember when it was.
Sure. Wow, well, this has all been really, really interesting so far.
It's been.
And there's definitely more that I'd like to ask you,
Sure,
but
sure.
we'll just schedule another time, and I'm going to go ahead and end this recording right now. Let me just press this.